Welcome back to another episode of Touring the AFC South. I am your host, Mike Patton. And on this episode, I have the distinct honor and privilege to talk to one of the best breakdown of player people that I know, Mr. Emory Hunt. What's going on, man?
What's up, Mike, man? How you doing, man? Glad to be back on the show.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. It is my pleasure to bring you back. We're going to talk about of course, the top four quarterbacks in this draft, along with draft needs for the AFC South and some particular players you might have in mind for them. We're going to get into that a little bit later in the show. But first, like I open up every show, the Get It Off Your Chest segment. Now, of course, last month I talked more about women's history and wanted to highlight women in sports a lot more. This month, I want to talk about some things that have aggravated me over the time that I wasn't talking about them. Now, one of those things is pocket watchers. Now, if you don't know what a pocket watcher is, make some money and see what happens. Everybody gonna come tell you, hey, well, you should do this with this money. You shouldn't have made that, or you shouldn't have did this or did that. People always do that. And, they definitely do that about people in the NFL. So let me ask you, everyone that's watching or listening, what is the average career for an NFL player? Now, Emory, you might know this answer, but hey, sit this one out. Don't say that to me yet. I'm going to give them a minute. They may know. They probably yelling it out in their car or wherever they're listening, but it's 3.3 years. That is the average career for a player. Doesn't seem very long, does it? So if you know an NFL career is not that long, then why are you pocket watching on someone when they get an extension, when they get all that guaranteed money, when you know their careers are short? Let me give you an example. We'll talk about Jeffrey Simmons. I'm not saying anyone said this about Jeffrey Simmons, so let me just say that off top. But, let me give you an example. Like, of course he gets his money, $94 million, $66 million guaranteed. It wouldn't surprise me if these three things were said. He isn't worth that money. He should have got more money, or I'm happy he got his money. Now, the last one, not very many would probably say that. But the first two, you're probably going to see that happen a lot. But, one thing I wonder is why are people so worried? Why are they so worried about their pockets? Because, it's their money, not your money. But, I digress. Lots of times, of course, people become couch GMs and then they start wanting to do the budget of the team. But the funny thing is the same people probably are struggling in the budgets that they're coming up with in their just normal everyday living, but they want to budget somebody else's money, which is quite interesting to me. But the thing is, there's only really three people or two or three people that really need to worry about it and talk about it: the player, the team, or the people that actually do the contracts, and analysts that go over the contracts, because they're really the three people that are really qualified to talk about it. Other than that, really, you're just talking to be talking. And it seems like to me you're a little bit envious. That's my Get Off Your Chest segment. I want to talk about the pocket watchers because it drives me nuts. Every offseason free agency, you see somebody say, oh, why did he get that money? Well, he shouldn't have got this. It just drives me crazy, Emory. I had to get it off my chest, man.
Nah, you're absolutely right, man. You're dead on. Again, it's not your money, so why should it matter? Just sit back and enjoy what your team is doing and hope they win on Sunday.
That's right. That's right, man. Yeah. But not talking about pocket watchers anymore. We're going to set that one down. But we are going to talk about this draft because eventually some of these players will have their pockets watched by fans of the team as well. And, of course, the first people that everyone are talking about is the quarterbacks. You got your Will Levis from Kentucky. You got your C.J. Stroud from Ohio State. You've got your Bryce Young from Alabama. And you've got your Anthony Richardson from Florida. Now, the one intriguing name to a lot of people is Anthony Richardson. And we're going to talk about him, but I want to talk about, Richardson and, with Will Levis, because the interesting thing about him is, they talk about the potential of Richardson and the potential of Levis. They talk about those things in two different ways. They talk about Levis with him being injured and, he was injured. And by the way, Bryce Young was injured through most of his season, but nobody's giving him any benefit of doubt or things like that with his issues that he was going through. But that's another subject for another time, or it could be a subject for today. But nobody talks about that. But Will Levis, they talk about the potential there. Now, when you talk about Anthony Richardson, everyone talks about the potential, but how bad he looked at certain times. In your opinion, the potential of Levis, is it better than Richardson, or is it vice versa, or what do you kind of think on either one of those?
Well, the potential for Richardson is sky high because number one, he's better than Levis. Number two, he's 20. And number three, you see seeds of brilliance, in his infancy in terms of the amount of time, the amount of games he started. Levis is already 24. And people bring up last year's film. Well, last year's film looks like this year's film, and they bring up last year's weapons. He had this at receiver. Well, are we talking about Wan'Dale Robinson? And a lot of Wan'Dale Robinson's success was on these little tap passes. So what are we even talking about? Levis to me is what you see is what you're going to get, and there's nothing wrong with him being a Matt Schaub type talent, or a Carson Wentz, where he can just be like a fringe starter, high end QB2. But that to me is what you don't take in round one.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. I mean, I get people trying to talk him up and say different things about him, but I've watched him. I'm really not highly impressed to be like, oh, this guy could be the guy. I don't get that feeling about him. With Anthony Richardson, I get that feeling about him because, of course, you change coaches and things like that. Kind of times in Florida.
I'm sorry, repeat that. What'd you say?
Yeah. Going to Anthony Richardson, he switched coaches, of course, during his career at the University of Florida. So do you think that kind of played into him, kind of sputtering at times?
Well, he switched coaching staffs, but he did go into this year as a full-fledged starter. So the fact of the matter is, last year he was subbing in and out at sporadic times with Emory Jones. So he didn't really know when he was going to play, but he had to stay ready. But the good part about that is that when he got in the game, you saw him have some success in certain moments. I always bring up the game against LSU in 2021 where he did just that, took over that game and played really well. So going into the season, you just thought that they were going to have much more success offensively because of now he's going in as the unquestioned starter. He has this system that's, he can now ingratiate himself with it, even though it's year one, but they just didn't have the receiving options that were as consistent as they had in years prior. So the good part about it, again, for him, you saw enough brilliance in flashes to where you say, hey, this kid is trending in the right direction. And when you really study how he played, the numbers actually don't do his play any service because he is way better than what his numbers may indicate.
And people don't factor in also that some of his receivers drop passes that hit him in the hands. Well, they don't factor that in either. Now, going to the other two quarterbacks, C.J. Stroud and Bryce Young. Now, those too many are the number 1 and 2 quarterback, even with all the hype around Anthony Richardson. And I've heard them talked about to the Texans potentially as well. So I'm just going to paint this scenario. You've got C.J. Stroud and you've got Bryce Young, and they're both quarterbacks and possibly for the Texans. What one do you think kind of fits them in terms of the Texans more, in your opinion, and what they need?
I feel like Bryce Young fits the Texans more. I like that fit more so than Stroud. I think Stroud fits a little bit more with Carolina, and I think Anthony Richardson fits best with Indianapolis. I feel like those three spots, if they land in those three spots, all three can hit the ground running. Now, they can succeed in any other situation because they're talented, but just selfishly, I would like to see them end up in those particular spots because of their skill set, their traits, and the people that's going to be coaching them and what they currently have on the roster in terms of being set up for success. I think all three going into those individual spots sets them up for the most success right out of the gate.
All right. Well, I just wanted to get that out the way. Talk about the top four quarterbacks because Lord have mercy, everyone has talked about them and broke them down and taken it. Maybe broke them down all the way to what they eat for lunch, dinner, and breakfast. I mean, it's just it becomes a lot at the point in time. But hey, I wanted to get the expert opinion from you on that one, Emory. We're going to talk about a little bit more breaking down the teams in the AFC South. We're going to start with the Texans, go with the Titans, Colts, and Jaguars. But first, we're going to take a commercial break. We'll be right back with 20 AFC South. Mike Pat.
Whether it's local or long distance, Milligan Logistics has you covered. Milligan Logistics was established in 2020 with over a combined 15 years of experience in trucking, hauling, and logistics, along with over 50 years collectively of project management experience. Again, whether it's near or far, Milligan Logistics has you covered with quality service, efficiency while taking pleasure in exceeding clients' expectations. Need goods moved short or long distance? Milligan Logistics has you covered. Just reach out to them at 615-354-2618. That's 615-354-2618. Or you can send them an email at milliganlogistics@gmail.com. And again, that's milliganlogistics@gmail.com.
All right, and we're back. And before we went to break, we were talking about the Texans, Titans, Colts, and Jaguars. Now I know I didn't put those in the order of how they finished, but boy, oh boy, it was an interesting start and finish to the AFC South, and it was a bad one for a few teams. We're not going to mention any names here, but I'm pretty sure it's obvious to a lot of people. But we're going to start with the Houston Texans. You did mention that you felt that Bryce Young would probably be the best fit there for them, but what are some? I know they have more needs. Of course, in my opinion, they have more needs at wide receiver, offensive line, an edge rusher they need to kind of stand out. Is there anything else that you may think I may be missing or in regards to that team and what they need?
No, you kind of hit the nail on the head. I think those are where they can go. And good thing for Houston is that they have 2 first-round picks to address those are multiple needs. One being quarterback being the biggest, especially picking at number 2. And then they can go ahead and take that positional player at number 12, whether it's on offense or defense. But I do think you hit the nail on the head with what they need.
Yeah, definitely. And I know they have John Mechie the third. Hopefully he's recovered from his battle with cancer, and potentially he'll be back. But is there any kind of particular players, perhaps, that you think can kind of fit the mold of anything that they need, perhaps?
I mean, if you're talking about receiver, clearly Jackson Smith and Jigba is a popular one. Gives them someone that can work underneath, that can, get himself open quickly and make things happen after the catch. So to me, when you're breaking in a young quarterback, you want someone like that to pair up with because you want these catch and run guys. The good thing for the Texans, they do have a bevy of tight ends that have a ton of talent. So I would expect them, if they don't address wide receiver at pick 12, to say, hey, we can fill in other gaps on defense and pick wide receivers maybe later in the draft, but we could lean on this quartet of tight ends that they have on a roster.
Yeah, they definitely have some talented tight ends. I mean, I kind of wonder, is Brevin Jordan eventually going to take that step up and be that guy? Because all kind of potential he had coming out of the U, but we'll see what happens there with him. Going over to switch to the Titans now. They started off the season well, and it didn't end very well. Like 7 losses in a row and no playoffs and a lot of bad feelings around Nashville when it came to them. So it is what it is. But, a couple spots that I can look at this team and just point out and be like, okay, cool. Offensive line, just like how, the Texans need offensive line help. I would say even with the people they brought in, they probably are still going to look there. They're probably still going to look at they're going to look at wide receiver because right now they have Burks at wide receiver and they have Chigaquanko at tight end. But other than that, not really a ton of dynamic people at that position. And also another position I would say that I did talk to Blaine Bishop last week, and actually he mentioned the cornerback spot, which I can definitely agree with because Fulton's been hurt sometimes, even though when he plays, he definitely does do his thing, and Farley can't stay healthy. So those are the three positions that I was looking at. I'm like, okay, cool. If you need anything, that would be it. I mean, would you agree, or do you think there's somewhere I'm missing, perhaps?
I'd say wide receiver as well. You look at what they drafted last year out of Arkansas. He's one option, a very good option. They need dynamic play elsewhere at receiver. I think that's where they should potentially go. Continue to stockpile weapons, man, and help build the confidence uh, around Malik Willis and allow him to go in there and play well. I know Tannehill is still the starter, but you still have to find a way to get someone outside of what you drafted last year. You need multiple options. Do what the Bengals did with Joe Burrow. Stockpile that receiving core, and I think that's another area where they have to go at probably early, preferably early, depending on who is there, and also edge rusher. I feel like they need someone outside of Harold Landry. If they can get bookends that can really get after the quarterback, now they're doing things dangerously on defense.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting just to see where they go. I would not be surprised if they did pick an offensive lineman. It depends on kind of their feeling, I guess, about Petit Ferreira on the opposite of Andre Dillard, which that'll be interesting to see. And they may perhaps stick with Arden Key as him opposite of Harold Landry, but you never know. You never know what can happen. You never know what is possible there. Which it'll be interesting to kind of see if they keep that dynamic, add to that dynamic, and then maybe a little bit later, I would say they probably may dip into the linebacker well because, of course, David Long Jr. You brought in a guy from San Francisco, but you still need some depth there, in my opinion, and you lost a couple pieces as well to other teams during the offseason that were backups. So it's going to be interesting just to see there, but I agree with you. They definitely need to add more weapons at the wide receiver spot. Any guys in particular that you could see kind of looking at the Titans that kind of fit the mold of what they need, perhaps?
Again, any big receiver, just plug them in Tennessee because it seems like that's what they like. There's a lot of big receivers in this class. So, if you want to go early or want to go later, not to sound like a broken record, but Jackson Smith and Jigba would be perfect for Tennessee. Later on in the draft, you look at someone like C.J. Johnson out of East Carolina would be another really good fit. Isaiah Winstead, guys that can just play big. They like big receivers. So I think as long as you have that as the blueprint, you should be fine.
Gotcha. Okay. Another team that was expected to do great things in the AFC South, but did not meet those expectations. That would be the Indianapolis Colts with Matt Ryan at the helm, which he's not at the helm anymore because they got rid of him. But they're more than likely going to draft a quarterback. May draft one in the first round, may end up drafting one later. You never know when it comes to their general manager, who seems to do some interesting things. But I digress. Offensively, it's going to be interesting just to see what they can do. I mean, they have a good group of tight ends, but they have Michael Pittman Jr. and they have their rookie they drafted last year. The name is escaping me right now. But I mean, offensively, would you think they would do it? Kind of dive more into that offensive line, perhaps?
It's possible because they do need depth. Remember, they dealt with some injuries last year and things kind of fell apart. But you hope when you pair a mobile quarterback with that, it could kind of help you out a little bit because they can get out the way. But you still want to build some depth there on the offensive line. I would probably lean toward finding. I know they've hammered this point home with how they've drafted, what they went out and grabbed in free agency, but they got to figure out a way to get it right at the edge rusher position. You got to find someone that can really get after the quarterback. So it'll be fascinating to see how they attack that on the back end of the draft. They swung and missed in the first round, in my opinion. But for them, I think they are a quarterback away from being back in the playoffs. And even if it's a rookie, any one of the three guys we talked about, Richardson, Stroud, Bryce Young, would instantly make them a threat in the AFC South, in my opinion, despite being a rookie. Especially Richardson, because if you pair his athleticism up with Shane Steichen and also with Jonathan Taylor. Man, we just saw that play out in Philadelphia. It could be the same thing in Indianapolis, especially when you consider what they have at wide receiver, at tight end, solid offensive line. You can add some depth there, like we talked about. But I think this team is really a quarterback away.
Gotcha. Well, one thing I would mention too is the cornerback play. The cornerback, they're a little thin at cornerback. Remember last year they had Gilmore at corner. Of course, he now is in Dallas, and you have Kenny Moore, who's your veteran there. He really didn't have the season that everyone thought he would or should have, but he's the veteran there, so they really can't get rid of him because really there's a lot of young guys or a lot of unproven guys there. Do you think they kind of tap into that well? I've been heard the name of. I heard Joey Porter Jr. mentioned with the Colts a couple times. I mean, what do you think of that pairing, perhaps?
Well, it depends on what type of style they want to run on defense. And we know Porter is someone that can come in and play press. Doesn't really turn the ball over a lot. But if he continue to excel in press coverage, that kind of helps them out. Yeah, cornerback is definitely a spot. You had Dallas Flowers. You like him as your return specialist. You like Rodgers as your return specialist. Can both guys step up and be out there full time as corners? Rod Flowers is a little bit older of a prospect, so he's someone that you're really gonna have to continue to get younger. See it. Listen, all options are on the table for all of these teams. You got to find ways to get depth at every position. So yeah, it wouldn't either way. It wouldn't shock me to see them go defensive back or depth on the offensive line or wherever outside of quarterback at number 4.
All right. And last but certainly not least, I did save the best in terms of last year in the AFC South for last. That would be the Jacksonville Jaguars. Ironically, they don't seem to have as many holes as the other teams in the AFC South, whether that be drafting as high as they've been drafting over the years or whether it just be picking up good free agents and good players in certain rounds. But they don't have as many holes. Wide receiver spot, you got a couple good wide receivers there, and you're bringing in Calvin Ridley. He's basically coming off suspension there. You do have a running back that, unfortunately he does stay hurt, but they did get a backup, I believe, there too. The biggest thing I can think of is, maybe trying to figure out their outside linebacker spot because they were kind of rotating 2 rookies at it because they just weren't sure which one would step up. Or, I would say maybe the corner opposite. That could be something particularly to look at for them. If I'm missing anything, definitely let me know. I'm just thinking, there's not a lot of holes that they have on that team.
I think defensive tackle could be a spot where they focus on. If someone like Brian Bresee is there for them in round 1, I think he would make a fantastic fit because they have what they need at edge rusher. They drafted Trayvon Walker last year. We know about what Josh Allen brings to the table. I love the athleticism at the second level. Those young guys you talked about, they should be better in year 2, much more experience. Depth at corner is another place, but if they can find one of these standout D tackles, maybe if a Jalen Carter falls for whatever reason, or if Brian Bresee is there, I think that's a guy that can help them up front and be stellar with him, Trayvon Walker, Josh Allen. I think that would be a phenomenal front to compete in the AFC South when you have to be able to stop the run, considering you're dealing with, Derrick Henry, you're dealing with Jonathan Taylor, you're dealing with Dameon Pierce, and what we expect the Texans to do running the football. I think right down the middle, I'm talking about that interior defensive line. If there's a blue chip prospect there, and I think Bresee is one, you got to go and get him.
Well, you get there, and I won't tell the Titans that you said they might draft one because that might hurt their feelings. But I'm kidding. But yeah, it's definitely going to be an interesting time in the AFC South. Everyone's trying to catch the Jaguars. Who has said that before in the last decade? But everyone's trying to catch the Jaguars and trying to get better and trying to develop their teams so where they can kind of get out of the doldrums and get back to where they were in the case of the Colts and the Texans, Colts and the Titans. The Texans trying to get back on a consistent path of being better and showing excellence under DeMeco Ryans. But that is the end of talking about our draft and what people will need to do or what things could potentially be out there for them. But that isn't the end of the show because I have a game for you, Emory. I have 5 questions, 2 answers, and 1 choice. Are you ready?
Let's go.
All right. Color analyst or scouting work, which one do you like more?
They're equal because they require different tools. Man, I know I have to pick one or the other, but I truly believe both are great, but because they require two different things, and so I can't pick just one because they both challenge me in different ways.
Okay, well, because you're the czar of the playbook, I'm gonna let you get away with that one.
Mm.
But Richardson or Levis, if you had to pick one quarterback you're taking, well, I knew that answer.
Yeah, Levis is going be 18, so I mean, there's like 16 other guys I would take ahead of Will Levis, so that was an easy one.
Right. Now, Stroud or Young, which one are you taking to lead your team?
I'm taking Young. Although it's slightly, I have the same grade on all three: Richardson, Young, and Stroud. That's how I rank them 2, 1, 2, and 3. But they all have the same grade. But I'm gonna take Young because I like the dynamic ability to do things off script. That's how you have to win a lot in today's game. So by a smidge, I'm taking Bryce Young because of that dynamic playmaking ability.
Yeah, an example of that was the Texas game. Remember the guy came off the end free. He just ducked up under him, scooted on out the side, and ran for the first down. I'm still watching that play sometimes and like, how did he do that?
But or even just to come back against Auburn when they were down, looking like they were going to be beat. This was last year, and he drove them 99 yards for the game-winning touchdown to put it in overtime, and then they ultimately won in overtime. Just those type of things you see a little bit of magic from Bryce Young.
Now, I will tell you this, and people are probably going to laugh when I tell them this, but every time I look at Bryce Young, he reminds me of a character in Remember the Titans. He reminds me of Rev in Remember the Titans. Every time I see him, I'm like, there goes Rev. And I catch myself saying it's Bryce Young, not Rev. Every time. All right. We're going to go to styles of running backs. Would you rather have a Brian Westbrook style running back or a Derrick Henry style running back?
Brian Westbrook, because with the way Brian Westbrook is able to rip off long runs, make guys miss, you won't need a Derrick Henry to consistently wear down, a defense because the game will be so out of reach because you have a game breaker in the backfield. So give me the Brian Westbrook over the Derrick Henry.
Okay, interesting choice. Now, I know where you're from, so I had to throw one in there for this one. 2 guys that play for the New Orleans Saints, Aaron Brooks or Jeff Blake?
That's a good one because Jeff Blake had that team rolling before he injured his foot. But Aaron Brooks gave them what we now see in today's game. So I'm going to go with Aaron Brooks. Won them their first playoff game, did a fantastic job leading that football team. He was ahead of his time. And Jeff Blake was ahead of his time. I wish both guys, were born maybe 15 years later and they would be in today's game, playing the position how they played it. I feel bad for both of them, but they kind of helped set the trend of what works. So it's a tough choice because both did great things, but I'm going to side with Aaron Brooks because he was able to get that first playoff win for the franchise.
All right. Well, that is the end of 5 questions, 2 answers, 1 choice. You're off the hot seat. And then we have reached the end of the show. I want to thank you, Emory, for coming on, giving us your knowledge, kind of breaking down a few things for me. Maybe that I kind of, how someone kind of puts something out there, but you kind of smooth the edges out. Yeah, Emory, that's what you did for the show tonight, man. And I want to thank you for coming on. If you can't tell everyone where they can find you, where they can reach you, where they can go get your guide, we mentioned, folks, hey, the man breaks down everything. Go get the guide. But I'm going to leave that to you, Emory. Go ahead.
The best guide out there is the industry standard, footballgameplan.com/2023 draft guide. Over 1,000 individual scouting reports. Anybody that doesn't have all scouting reports and only has a few with a long list of players, that's a BS draft guide. This is a real draft guide. You want to know who's going to get drafted? You want to know about your team, who they bring in as an undrafted free agent or whatnot? we probably have a scouting report on them because we have over 1,000 individual scouting reports. You can find that at footballgameplan.com/2023 draft guide. It's a full color PDF file right in your inbox once you place the order, and you have it at your fingertips. And it's good not only for the draft, leading up to the draft, through the draft, after the draft is great during preseason training camp. So that way you know who's on the roster, what's going on around the NFL. The AFC South, you'd be able to get a good grasp of what the other teams brought in. It's a fantastic draft guide, not because I scouted and wrote all the reports, but because I know it's a valuable asset for you that can serve in a multitude of ways for you throughout the course of the season. Footballgameplan.com/2023 draft guide, the industry standard.
There you go. There you go. Now, all I can say is this. You can go ahead and bet on the Mel Kipers and things like that. I'm going to bet on Emory Hunt 10 times out of 10. I want to thank you all for tuning in to Touring the AFC South. Talked a little draft, a little bit of the 4 quarterbacks that are going to be going at the top of this draft or supposed to go at the top of this draft. I want to thank you all for tuning in. You can find Touring the AFC South on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, or if you like to watch the show, you can find it on YouTube. And also, you can find me on Twitter at MikePatton82. That's MikePatton82, and on Instagram at that's THA, not THE, _general_MP. Thank you all again for tuning in to Touring the AFC South with your host, Mike Patton. We're out.